Friends, I was once giving a sermon in a church, and a woman got up with her crying child, really shrieking, and left the church, and I said, "Madam, it's all right." So the child isn't bothering me. She said, "I know, but you're bothering the child." And I was giving a talk in Canada once on a Sunday, and I noticed that in the theater, there were a number of people, men, taking up a collection. And when they finally came up to the front row, I could see them very well, I leaned over and I said to one of them, I said, "What's the idea of taking up a collection during this lecture?" He said, "To get better speakers for next year." So I am not presenting myself as a model to you on how to talk. It's just merely that there have been so many letters coming to me asking me to give a few suggestions that I will give them to you. They are only personal. They may not apply to everyone, but I will give them to you for what they are worth. If I can talk now, I certainly couldn't always talk. There came a turning point in my life. It was in college when I was a freshman. I was on the debating team, which was in the college that I attended. A great honor because they put a tremendous premium on debating. I thought I was good because, after all, I was picked as a freshman. I had to be good. And the night before the debate with Notre Dame University, the coach of our debating team, Father Bergen, called me over to his office and he said, "You are the worst talker we've ever had in this college." That was a terrible shock to me. I said, "Well, if I'm so terrible, why did you pick me on the team?" He said, "Because you can think, not because you can talk." But he said, "You're going to learn to talk before you leave this room. Take a paragraph out of that speech, any paragraph you like." I remember we were talking on the Merchant Marine. I'll never forget, the paragraph began, "I think it needs no argument to prove," and so forth. So he said, "Stand up there against the wall," which I did. Now he said, "Go over that paragraph." At the end of it, he said, "Do you see your mistake?" I said, "No." "Go over it again." Went over it 1 hour, 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. I was dead. So was he. And every 2 or 3 minutes when I finished it, he would say, "Do you see your mistake?" I said, "No." But being naturally quick, after 2 hours and a half, I saw it. He said, "Do you see your mistake?" I said, "Yes, I think I do. I'm not natural." He said, "That's right. That's all." And he dismissed me. You notice how often speakers, as soon as they get up on a platform, or ministers or priests in the pulpit, everything changes, their voice changes, their attitudes, their poses. I think many prayers that we say we're not talking to God. We're talking to an audience, particularly prayers at banquets, inaugurations, and so forth. And we put on artificial poses. "Oh God, we ask thee to send down upon us thy benediction, thy blessing upon the sailors who are at sea, the merchants at their counting table, the lawyers at their bar." Well, that's not the way people talk. So, being natural and preparing a talk, what would be some suggestions? Now, the way I prepare a talk is not perhaps the way everyone would want to do it, but I can only give you my way. In order to prepare a talk, one must do a tremendous amount of reading. Each one of these telecasts of mine would represent between 20 and 40 hours of study. When I get through, what have I got? Nothing but a bits of yellow pages. I think I have one in my pocket. But before I show it to you, I will tell you what I do. I study, I do research, and I begin to understand the subject. Then, when it gets into my head, I begin to write out points. Generally just 3 or 4 points that I'm going to talk about. I will only write out the heading. And then I will tear up the paper and then rethink what I was saying. So that when I prepare a telecast, there must be 20, 30 to maybe 100 pages that are torn up. And then the closer I get to the end, the smaller the pages are. This is this telecast. And I brought it out here, not because I'm going to refer to it, but just simply because it shows you the points, how small the points are. And by doing a tremendous amount of study, the mind creates an atmosphere for the talk. There is much more air round about us than ever gets into the lung. There's more food at the table than ever gets into our stomach. There are more things to see in nature than ever comes into the eye. And so when one rises to give a talk, one should have an atmosphere, a certain ambient knowledge round about that one can pull in this idea or that, as it were, from the air while you're talking. So that instead of writing out the speech, word for word beforehand, and then memorizing it like this, one thinks it from the head out. That's the reason you tear up the paper, so you don't have any information. You have to think it. Then you write down the ideas again. Well, by the time you get up to talk, you've already given the speech 10 or 15 times. And incidentally, it isn't a bad idea sometimes to talk out loud. If you can find a place in this day and age where you can walk and talk out loud without being counted crazy. How often, for example, students are asked to explain something. They think they know the lesson. When they get up, it's not there. Why? Because they were consecrated and dedicated to a dead page. Never went through their mind. Sometimes teachers are just textbooks wired for sound. And studying is nothing but what is in print, passing from the mind of the book to the notebook of the teacher, or rather from the notebook of the teacher to the notebook of the student without passing through the mind of either. Now this method of preparation is hard. It's very much easier to write something out and then to learn it than to do it this way. Sometimes if you do not feel well when you're giving a telecast or a lecture, thoughts do not come. You cannot always recall exactly what you had in your mind. But at any rate, there's a spontaneity. That's what people like. Even the mistakes you make. Now, one of the reasons, for example, why people like to have me draw is because everybody in the audience can draw better than I can. They feel they're far superior, and rightly so. So if I make a mistake in talking, fine. That's good. They say, I could do it just as well as that. And they can. This method, while it's harder and is a wonderful preparation for absorbing knowledge, has difficulties. One difficulty is that there are some people who give speeches who must write them out. For example, the President of the United States has to have his speeches written because every word is important. Then, too, there are some things that are not worth learning. John Barrymore, for example, would commit all the lines of Shakespeare by heart. But when he played in comedies and cheap movies and so forth, he absolutely refused to learn anything. He wanted helps outside. Now that's why people on television have to have aids that are outside. I do not use any kind of aid on the outside. If I read anything, I have it written out. Now there are two main props that are used in television. And the first prop is what is called an idiot card. An idiot card is something that is written out so that you'll not forget it. Now just suppose I were teaching you mathematics. Now I would be reading off this idiot card. And I would say to this vast television audience, 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 1 equals 3. 3 plus 3 equals 6. See, I don't forget it that way. Wonderful, isn't it? Now, you can, thank you for the idiot card. It was not an idiot that helped. It's only the card that's an idiot. And it's impossible for people who are constantly appearing, for example, on television, to study their lines or their commercials. And so they have to have them written out on these cards, but you can always tell. If you just look closely at anybody who's using an idiot card, this is generally the way. So do not be hard on them. If I were saying something that was not worth committing to study, I certainly would use one too. Now there's another prop, which is better. And that is what is called a teleprompter. And a teleprompter will have a whole speech on it. For example, when you hear people giving speeches on television, 999 out of 1,000 are using a teleprompter if they do not have the paper before them. Many of the commercials which you hear are written on teleprompters. And a teleprompter rolls. I was watching a television show once where the teleprompter got caught. And that's kind of hard. Now, for example, if I were using a teleprompter and I didn't know my lines, now this is exactly what I would have written out. My name is Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. My address is 366 5th Avenue, New York. See, then I don't forget. Now this is the teleprompter. These are some of the aids that are used in television, and television simply could not exist without. And they are helpful too, simply because one is apt to forget. Many times, you're standing before a television camera, momentarily I can't think of the next point. Well, I'll throw in a story or something till it comes back to me. You don't know it, but I do. I don't get too embarrassed. I don't get flustered because I can't remember it. I remember. I was giving a talk once in Ireland at the Eucharistic Congress. I've forgotten when it was, a long time ago. If there was ever a time in my life I wanted to do well, it was then. And I was reciting a poem that I know just as well as I know the Our Father. It was a poem written by an Irishman, Joseph Mary Plunt. The poem was, I see his blood upon the road. And in the star, glory of his eye. His body gleams amid eternal snows, his tears fall from the sky. I see his face in every flower. The thunder and the singing of the birds are but his voice. Carven by his power, rocks are his written will. And I forgot the next one. The reason I forgot was because I had said something before that the audience seemed to have taken politically. I didn't want it to have political significance. So while I was reciting this poem, I was giving myself an intellectual spanking. And I spanked myself so hard that when I got to the 9th line of this poem, I forgot. And I said to the audience, I forgot. Well, tens of the tremendous crowd there, tens of thousands of jaws dropped in disappointment. And when an Irish jaw drops, it collapses. So I had to get myself out of the difficulty. There came to me then a line of Patrick Henry. Not the one that you know. Well, Patrick Henry also said something else. He said, when you're in difficulty in an oration, throw yourself into the middle of a sentence and trust to God Almighty to get you to the other end. And so I began. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I started. I said, I'm glad I forgot. I didn't know how I was going to continue, so I started again. If I had ever wished to have forgotten anything, so I thought I'd give myself another jump on the springing wheel. If I had ever prayed to have forgotten anything, I should have prayed to have forgotten these lines of Joseph Mary Plunkett. I think there's beautiful symbolism in their forgetfulness. And that symbolism is that standing on the anvil of Ireland's soil, one should be able to hammer and forge out the sparks of his own poetry and not be dependent upon a magnanimous soul like Joseph Mary Plunkett. I got no credit for it afterwards because the audience said that was a great trick, pretending you forgot. It is always well to be prepared for such unexpected moments when you do forget. And even better still, when you're at a banquet and called upon to give a talk. And you have to begin with something that is not too heavy. In fact, one should always begin with something that's not too heavy. For example, you just simply cannot begin a speech by saying, ladies and gentlemen, Accipiter Frontalis, the compolistic convolutions, the metaphorical Avicliarum Pelviarum. That's a little too serious. You have to start with something that's common to the audience. Now, I think the best story of all, being called upon to talk without preparation and unexpected, was the delightful story of G.K. Chesterton. He was called on, he said, during the days of the persecution of the Christians, 2 Christians were out in the Colosseum. And some lions that had been released for 12 days, had been starved for 12 days, were released in their cages. They bounded out across the Flavian sands, were about to precipitate themselves upon the poor Christians. And the Christians reached out their arms, put them around the lion's neck, and began to say something in the lion's ear. The emperor was furious. He came for blood, not comedy, because the lions went back again to their cages without touching the Christians. So the emperor, being furious, ordered other lions that had been starved for 4 weeks released. They bounded out after their prey, were about to precipitate themselves upon the Christians. And the Christians reached out their arms, put them around the lion's neck, whispered something in the lion's ear, and the lions left them and went back again to the cage. The emperor sent for the Christians. What are you doing to my starving lions? Nothing. Nothing but whispering something. But what do you whisper? The Christian said, we say, after this meal, you have to give a speech. So a preparation is the most important part of the talk, and then as regards delivery. What is important is sincerity, meaning what you say. Children are the best judges of anything that's heard on television. I do not mean dramas where there's an artificial emotional interest created. But children who may not understand what is being said, they know whether the speaker is sincere or not. Incidentally, that's a good word, sincere. When the Romans put up their many marble columns in their temples and their courts, they sometimes would find marble that had a flaw in it. So they would fill it up with wax and cover it. Wax in Latin is cera. If they found a perfect marble that had no need of artificial filling, then it was called sine in Latin, means without wax, or sincere. This is about the only suggestion that I would give for delivery. One just simply feels what's in his heart, that's all. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And one must not be too long. It's always better to have an audience say, I wished he talked longer, than to have them say, he had 3 good chances to quit. And then too, in the communication of any idea, the secret of a good talk is the secret of fire. Fire has 2 qualities, heat and light. The light corresponds to the truth. The heat corresponds to the zeal, to the passion, to the fire. And the fire and the passion come always from the truth. When one is on fire with anything, really believes it, all the words come out natural. And above all things else, the making of an orator too, really on his knees. The power to make an audience feel what you're saying does not come just from these fires. It comes from fires that have been stolen from heaven, given to the speaker. This is influence. This is power.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees. The bishop wrote 94 books, recorded countless radio shows, and appeared on hundreds of network and syndicated television programs. His legacy is a treasure of joy that transcends time and helps us to believe that truly life is worth living.
Really, was because of this incident. This particular day, I was too busy to go to dinner, so in the afternoon I went into a grocery store to buy some graham crackers. And in the back of the store was a mother with her 4-year-old son. He just pulled a bottle off the shelf, a bottle of vinegar, and broken the bottle, and the pieces were on the floor along with the vinegar. The mother was saying to him repeatedly, pick up those pieces. The more she insisted on it, the more he refused. And she would have loved to have cracked him, but she didn't want to look too cruel before the customers. And the father was there, and of course he was busy. And that gave him the very happy air of neutrality. He didn't have to interfere. And finally, Finally, the mother was intense with rage, and you could see what the father was saying. He was saying the kid's just exactly like her folks. And you know very well what she was saying, stubborn like the old man. And, but in any case, she finally picked up the kid like a rag doll and went off the premises with him. And so it set me thinking and brought the subject of this telecast. Who won? The child or the mother? The child didn't pick up the pieces. He was weak, but he had resort to tears, which is always the last resort of weakness. She was strong, but did she win? Well, she resignated a certain amount of power, but she had to do it. And that got me thinking about the strong and the weak. And it was put very well by a European doctor, Dr. Jean Rougemont, who said, if I am stronger than my neighbor, I despise him. If I am weaker than my neighbor, I fear him. If I am equal to my neighbor, I resort to subterfuges to escape obedience or to assert my superiority. So that brings up the problem, how are we going to solve this tension between, well, the rich, the poor, the educated, the uneducated, and the strong and the weak? For example, when the rich help the poor, perhaps they're obsequious, and then the poor are humiliated. Learned people are impatient with those that are ignorant. And the ignorant people, too, are humbled very often when taught by those that are wise. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is caring. Now, I'm going to try to tell you what caring is, but I'm going to do it, first of all, in an abstract way, so you'll think I'm learned, and we will give examples. And it is this: the strong must feel their weakness. Strong must feel their weakness. The rich must feel their poverty. The wise must feel their ignorance. How can this be done? Well, let the strong begin to examine themselves and find out how weak they are, first of all. You think you're real strong? Strong-minded, strong-willed? Did you keep the last New Year's resolution? Do you keep on a diet? I know a woman who went into a gymnasium and the instructor said you have to chin yourself 20 times a day. She said, which chin? And so the strong must ask themselves, have I been able to overcome certain habits, for example? When cocktails are free, can I resist the third? If I smoke, would I ever give up a package of cigarettes a week, say, for the poor? And then as regards the rich, you know, the angel just cleaning my backboard, I noticed his halo was on crooked tonight. And then the same is with the rich. Let them look into themselves. They really are poor. What virtue have they? Charity? Justice? When they examine themselves, they find themselves on the inside really nothing but rags. Oh yes, they've got something in their pocket. And the wise? They know all the books, yes. Do they know the meaning and purpose of life? So, just as soon as a strong man begins to feel his weakness, then you have a decent kind of equality. Then it's not based on law. It's not based on legal fictions. It's based really on caring and on love. Notice how that comes out when a person has to have an operation. Go before a doctor. One doctor will say to you, you have to have this operation. It's rather serious, but you'll be in skilled hands. Do not worry. And another doctor will say to a patient, I had that operation. I came through it. Immediately there's a rapport, a relationship, a likeness, an understanding. No superiority. So there need not be in this relationship caring any such thing as Pharisaism, moralism, looking down the nose at anyone, simply because one really cares. Now let us apply this to ourselves. We say, well, how can we do that? How can a strong man begin to feel his weakness and so forth? Well, and how can I act toward others in that charitable fashion? Well, let us begin asking ourselves, aren't there moments when I hate myself? Know that I'm rotten on the inside? The water cooler in the office? I complain and talk in a nasty fashion about someone? Looking back over my life, it's been spoiled. Weakness, things to be hated, but I sure like myself. So when you go into a room, despite the fact that you've often said to yourself, oh, I hate myself for that, but you take the easiest chair in the room, don't you? When you go into a restaurant and you don't like a certain kind of food, do you order it? Don't you hate yourself? For example, I don't like chicken. I announce that every 2 years over the television in case I'm invited out to dinner. And this is about the time to announce it. I will tell you the reason why, actually. The reason is that when I was a boy, my father would send me out to a farm during the summer vacation and sometimes on weekends. And the farmer would give chicken dinners every time I went out, and I had to wring the chickens' necks. I rang, I think, in round numbers, 7,683 chickens' necks. So, but when I go into a restaurant, do I order chicken? No. Despite the fact, for example, that there are many things that I know I find very despicable in myself. Now, if I, who hate myself, find much that is lovable, if I, who know all of my weaknesses, can still take good care of myself, if I am that way to myself, why can't I be that way to my neighbor who's weak too? If I have money and he does not have any, and I know on the inside how poverty-stricken I am as regards goodness, why can't I be good to him when he's poor? This is the basis of caring. Then I belong to the companionship of the needy. The fellowship of those that are looking for help. I'm not above them. I'm one with them. Did you ever ask yourself why our blessed Lord should have said, love your neighbor as yourself? Why did he not say, love your neighbor more than yourself? Well, because if you love yourself, knowing really the way you are, then if you give that kind of love to your neighbor, you really are wonderful. You're marvelous. And then, of course, the greatest reason of all is, well, I'm loved by God. Therefore, I've got to love everybody else. I must not say, for example, God loves everybody, therefore God loves me. No. God loves me, therefore he must love everybody. So you see, the basis of caring is this real kind of love. And what a difference it makes. Here was a girl and a only child of a husband and wife who were always quarreling. She grew up unwanted, unloved, and she lost faith in fellow man. She even lost faith in herself. And so as a young woman, she was miserable and unhappy. And in the town was a rich young man who fell in love with her. And he saw beneath all of that rough exterior not a rhinestone in the rough, but a diamond in the rough. And immediately she changed. Why? She was loved. She was cared for.
Fire-pounding drums, sinful ignite. Classical flourishes paint a vibrant light. Indie rock guitars scream with pure delight. Let's break the mold, this is our electric night. Neon dreamscapes bathed in stardust glow. Boundaries blurring, a genre overflow. Lost in the rhythm where possibilities flow. The symphony of chaos, it's our spirits aglow. We're electric rebels defying norm, breaking chains in a sonic storm. Sent to the whispers, molten to the cry. This is our revolution, soaring to the sky. Rare vocal soar.